an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Immortal Great Souls series, Book 1, Bastion, the final chapters, 76 through 80. In these chapters, I was right about the connection between Scorio and Miss Bitch, and I mean that in the best way. Also, though, this whole thing at the fucking, the second test, this is a real question, isn't it? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Dan for commissioning this episode and bearing with me as I record this episode on a different day standing up because I injured my back. So if you hear some weird shifting around, it's because I'm standing. Apologies, but sitting hurts right now. So this is the universe telling me to get up off my ass, I guess. So these chapters, guys, well, I'm going to just jump into 76 because even though where we wind up is really, really interesting, this is a question that is always relevant. So his test begins with him in an old tent. It's pouring rain, so it's doing that thing where it pools and then very slowly begins to drip through. There are a lot of other people here that he actually is able to recall their names from his, past self's brain. Unclear how this works still. And his brother, whose name we find out is Ibero here. I don't know if we had heard that before, but I'm pretty sure this is it. And he is telling all of them, basically, we are screwed and we should bail. And I just want to be clear, I have nothing against bailing. I think I've made that pretty clear in the history of this show. Sometimes bailing is where it's at. But he says, if we try to retreat with this many men, they'll catch us here, or here, or here. There's nowhere to run. Then we stand and fight. What choice do we have? We could do that, but that's tantamount to suicide. Our 200 boys against their 500 veterans? No, we've had a good run. The writing is on the wall. We fight, we die. We run, we die. We gave it our best, but we weren't able to muster enough support. We got Garvin Smith on our side and Lady Pharaoh, and there was a chance we could secure the support of the Sea Barons League, but that proved to be naught but smoke and mirrors. We're out of time, luck, and men. I say we disband. I will present myself to the king and ask for clemency. Lady Pharaoh has promised to vouch for me, and with her patronage and a little luck, I'll be cleared of wrongdoing and allowed to run for election again next spring. Now, I don't know what exactly his position is here, or if we have even been told that. This dude, though, let's just call our losses, and I'll try again. Maybe I can get elected again. This is so tricky a question because I feel there are times when this is the way to handle things. When you've got to be okay, look, the odds they're not only against us, but there's not even a real sliver of hope, outside hope, that we're going to be able to do this. And maybe we have to just completely rethink our strategy here. But when he says that he will be cleared of wrongdoing, and that maybe he can try for election again next spring, it just hit a little different on this side of Trump being got found guilty on 34 charges. It just felt a little less like I want to be supportive of this. And the fact that he does seem pretty sure that he would be cleared of wrongdoing. He's here fighting. I'm assuming this is treason. And basically being like, but whatever, they'll let it go. I don't know about y'all, but when somebody tells me they have that kind of immunity to the consequences of what they've done, they and I are no longer sitting in the same car anymore. Like, we're not in the same boat. And I can't trust their judgment anymore. It's not even about the implications of that immunity itself, although that is a huge problem. The fact that he would even potentially be electable, that would be an option, is bananas. And I don't know whether to believe him, but either he's right, and that's fucked up, or he's really wrong, in which case his judgment is hella flawed. And you don't want a guy like that running things ever, Like, this is not a good sign no matter what side of this sentence he's really falling on. So, for me, I'm sitting here like, oh boy, especially knowing that he is up for election, that just changes the tone of a lot of things. People are willing to do a lot of shit in order to guarantee themselves a continuing seat in power. And I don't know enough about this man to know whether or not he would actually uphold what it is they're fighting for here in his principles on the election trail. If this is something that he would sort of abandon once he realized that he couldn't win, and that would be sort of it. I don't know. So where I'm sitting, this feels pretty shitty. And I can understand why everybody is just getting upset. And Scorio realizes that a bunch of guys are looking at him, waiting for him to say something. And we find out that he has never, contradicted his brother in front of people. Like, when they've, had their time alone, he'll tell him exactly what he thinks. But he's really careful about this guy's image publicly, and he doesn't try to undermine him. And we find out here, he manifested these powers the day he saved him from the hanging. So that was indeed the first time that had ever happened. I had suspected it, but I wasn't totally sure. And because of this power, a lot of people are sort of like, Abero who? I know his brother, the one that's magic. I don't know what you care about the other brother for. And honestly, you can't help but understand that. And finally somebody is like, we really do want to know, Scorio. What do you think? And Abero seems to be, I can't totally tell, but I think he really believes his brother is going to support him on this too. He says, will you trust me one more time? Shall we work together to avoid slaughter? And when he thinks about Scorio, just backing off, cutting all of their losses and the effort that everybody has put into everything, and then hoping that through politics we'll be able to get what we want. He just doesn't believe it. And the way that this is written, he says, we disband, and there's a moment where everybody thinks he's siding with his brother, and then he says, but we reconvene in Waynwood with Garvin a week hence. Every man's to secret himself. I almost said secrete himself. Ugh. Very different. Through the marshes or down the white milk as he sees fit. Oh, not the white milk after I just said secrete himself. I'm so sorry, guys. Oh, I am 12 years old. Dan says sometimes there's a time to fight and politics isn't enough. Exactly. And I feel like you're in the midst of a war here. This is probably the time to just, like, you know, fucking put it on the table. And Ibero, genuinely, like, I think he was so confident of Scorio's supporting him that there's this look of, like, wait, what? On his face. And he's like, this was meant to be our final battle. The Sea Baron hasn't brought its mercenaries to our side. And Scorio's like, yeah, we should have known that the Sea Barons League wasn't going to show up for us. Like, the whole way we've been doing this is fucked up. We're trying to get, like, legit people, like mercenaries and knights. But we have people who we're fighting for that aren't being involved in the fight at all. We need to get them in on this. And understandably, his brother's like, bruh, they're going to be up against pros. That's just like, you're putting them there to be mown down. Like, that's fucked up. Everybody's going to die. And Scorio says, well, you've been wrong there. Rump's Moor was our lesson, but you didn't learn. We should avoid open battle at all costs. Then how are we to earn the respect of the king and with that change the taxation and inheritance laws? We don't need his respect. We need his fear. Not of us, but of his barons and dukes. If we bleed them, harry them, burn their estates, kill their livestock, and refuse always to meet them in battle, they'll feel the pain where they're most sensitive, in their coin purse. And the more coin they lose, the angrier they'll become with the king, until at last he'll have to sue for peace. And Ibero's like, yeah, he's never going to do that. And Scorio's like, okay, then we'll just keep doing that. We'll just keep doing it. All we need to do is be more patient than him. He's already lost a bunch of money fighting us. It's set. All of the pieces are in place for us to pull it off this way. And Ibero says, you don't win wars that way. That's how you turn people against you. They want to look up to their leaders, and you don't do that by setting fire to farms and skulking in the bushes. You won't win this war by trying to make wealthy allies either. They'll never play their hand till they know it's safe to do so. Where's Lady Pharaoh and her knights? Where's the Sea Barons League? We've wasted months chasing your dreams. I'm sorry, brother. We won't give up the rebellion. We won't ask the king for another chance. We'll not work with his rotten system. We'll force him to meet us at that table or die trying. Now, I want to point something out here, and I don't know what to think about it, because here's my problem. I very much agree with this whole sentiment. And this is really giving, like, the Minutemen in the United States Revolutionary War. We had just regular everyday people who were part of the army, and there was like a real sense of importance to being involved, even if you were not a professional soldier, being seen as like part of the fight. It made our battle a little different than a lot of the ones that had gone on in Europe. And that is something that we as Americans have often like sort of clung to as a representation of like the right way to do battle. And I fully support the theory behind it. And I want to believe that what the author feels about this is, let's do that shit again, now, today, because shit's fucked up. But I can't be sure, because the same people who talk about the American Revolution are also people who think socialism is a trap and bad, even though the involvement of people and looking out for everybody had been allegedly, like, what we had intended, giant asterisk, to black people and women, any minority. But you get what I'm saying. So what I keep getting hung up on, and I don't need to know this for sure, but I do have to share that I have my concerns. I don't feel like if an author's politics don't align with yours, that you just shouldn't read them. I do think that it's very easy to put your own, like, moral take on something that did not mean that. For example, that show The Boys, which I hear is quite lefty and a satire of, like, superhero stuff, there are a bunch of dudes lamenting that this season it has become woke because they were so busy putting their own agenda onto this very clearly written satire that they didn't get that's what was happening. I haven't seen The Boys, so I'm just saying this as an example. So I don't want to look at this as, like, nice, yeah, let's fucking riot in the streets and, you know, deface some property and whatever. I do think we should do that, and obviously this author also does. And I really kind of, like, want to know in a way, and also really don't. And Scorio's, like, revelation coming into this test is, it's my responsibility, which libertarians really love to dress up their unwillingness to help anybody that hasn't passed a little arbitrary test of theirs as, like, shirking responsibility, as not letting people be responsible for themselves. And I didn't realize as I was reading it, that was sort of the vibe I was getting. And so I was pushing back on it in that section when I talked about it a little bit with this sort of vague feeling of unease. And I think that's where it was coming down for me, was that it felt much more like, yeah, everything has been, like, fucked up for you and it's deeply unfair and the system is corrupt, but it's your responsibility. And every choice you made was your choice. Yes, but also the choices that you make are a product of the choices available to you. And we don't all have the same ones. And it just felt like we were going to just sort of sidestep that. It just felt weird. So I just wanted to, like, talk about that here because, like I said, there is a way to take this that I think, if you're looking at the purity of the mission, is very much giving Eat the Rich. But I don't know if the author intended that or not, because weirdly, especially libertarians, seem to get, like, tangled up in their own rhetoric sometimes and not realize that they sort of support the thing they claim they don't, as long as it's dressed up a certain way. And just wanted to share how I felt about this. So Ibero tells them straight up, you cannot defeat the system. This kingdom is greater and more powerful than even you can understand. And our one chance was to earn the king's respect. And if you're alone, you're going to die in the ditches like dogs. And everybody is basically like, wow, okay. And Scorio says, well, we're going to take our chances. If you want to go to the king and tell him you're sorry, I didn't do anything, go ahead. We'll be here doing more of the work we've been doing. And Ibero says, and despite this betrayal, brother, I'll ask for clemency of all of you as well. And, you know, we know that at least in the version of things that Kerrigan reported back, Scorio eventually, like, turns over his brother. And I don't know if this is the same series of events that leads to that in Kerrigan's version, or if there's a whole other thing that happens, like, a little bit later on. But I could see how, if this dude was going to try and, like, throw them under the bus, maybe Scorio would be like, all right, I didn't want to do this, but I'll tell him where you are, dude. I will do it. Dan says, I can't exactly be pure on, I think it's sure on this because of the later books, but there's definitely an eat the rich and power corrupts vibe as the series goes on. And that's what I'm saying, right? That's what's so tough, is that a lot of people who are like, I'm sorry if you can hear that. My neighbors got baby goats, guys, and they really bleat so loudly. So I'm sorry if you can hear that. But a lot of the people who are like preppers and are basically like, you can pry my guns out of my cold dead hands and I have a bunker that has, 17 years worth of canned food in it. They'll talk about eating the rich and power corrupting all damn day, but they mean like the Jews, like they have like they twist the ideology of just like, how about we just take care of everybody? And the people who are trying to keep us from doing that are the ones that need to be handled. And they turn it into like, oh, they're going to get you and they've fooled us all and the earth is flat and birds are fake and the moon is so it's just so hard because they'll just be right on the edge and you're like, yes, exactly. And then they say another thing and you're like, never mind. Oh my God, backing off really quickly now. So Dan says there's a lot of time spent on how anger can fuck up your decision making with Scorio. So that's the lens I see it through. That's interesting. And that's sort of like, I definitely believe that with Scorio, that's obviously valid. We've seen that a number of times already with him. But I also hesitate to condemn anger because it is so valid so often with certain people's experiences, So, and I don't think he's trying to invalidate that with Scorio's story. It's just, it's a tightrope. It's just, I'm going to have my eye on it. That's all I'm saying. I got my eye on it. I don't know totally how I should take this, but I'm kind of telling you how I did take this with room for me to change my mind. I'm not married to this interpretation. So eventually his brother is just like, well, good luck. I'm going to do what I can from afar. And he says, don't make the mistake of trusting the king or his men. I know my way around court, snapped Barrow. Better it turns out than I did this tent. Don't you fear for me. And with that, he was gone. And I just don't know. I feel like this is a guy who might be willing, if it's going to save his own skin, to sacrifice some other people. And yet, the reason he didn't want to do what Scorio is talking about is because he doesn't want a bunch of people to be sacrificed for no reason. So, I can't decide. This is my favorite kind of question, though, when the correct answer doesn't feel hugely obvious. There's a path that you feel is more in line with what you believe, but it's got so many drawbacks also that you can't ignore them and you can't just rationalize them as being worthwhile because those downsides are quite serious. And this is the shit that I just really enjoy talking about. So that's why I wanted to start with this whole thing, not just because it's the first part of this section, but I wanted to get all of my back and forth out before I went on to the rest of it. So yeah, Scorio gives word to everybody. He's like, all right, we're going to go into the marsh. Everybody has to drop stuff that is unessential. And it says the crowd broke into conversation as the men began to argue the best way to travel. It was his fight now. These men would live and die by his command. The thought chilled him, yet lit a burning desire in his heart. He'd do anything to lead them to victory. And with that thought, the world went dark, and Scorio found himself kneeling once more in the dark upon the bloody flagstones of the gauntlet. He blinked, raised his head, then realization hit him. By the 10 hells, I'm a damn tomb spark. I love that moment. I do. Because, of course, me as the reader knowing where he is, I'm fully like, oh my god, he's a tomb spark. Oh my god, he's a tomb spark. But his attention gets sucked so quickly into the moment and the choice that the fact that his understanding of that is a little delayed makes total sense. So yeah, this is great for a number of reasons. The least of which is not that all of his injuries that he has sustained are gone. Fine. And it turns out that when he uses the armor, I guess I want to call it, it covers even more of his body than it did before. His heart is unfortunately still fractured, so that is something that he is going to have to deal with. But that's, I mean, if you become a Tomb Spark here, I feel like you're going to be able to find what you need to fix your heart pretty quickly, because you've done some crazy shit, you know, like, and he's just delighted with how he feels after what he has gone through and like the, you know, beating that his body has taken, feeling totally rested and healthy. He's just sort of savoring this for a moment. And then turns out that he has horns that come out of his forehead. They were subtly striated, their points wicked, and he felt as if he were wearing a mighty crown, as if he'd been anointed by whatever dark power was fueling his powers and marked for greatness. And then there is the next thing where he's like, wait a second, I think this may be my shroud. And it creates this field around him, and he isn't sure what it does. It feels deeply connected to him. And so, you know, he's able to sense that the shroud is taking a ton of mana in order to sustain it. But he, you know, it's not going to be until he faces somebody and uses it that he's going to understand what it does. There was frustration. Jova had held her Tomb Spark abilities for the duration of her fight with Ravenna, while he'd barely been able to maintain them for 10-15 seconds. But that aggravation was swept away before the wonder of his state. Yeah, I get it, bud. I really do understand, like, having achieved something and being proud of it, but then kind of being like, I know that comparison is the thief of joy. It's just really hard not to do it sometimes when you are aware how good something can be, and your little crumb of good, you've got to savor it, but it can be very difficult to put away the fact that, like, they have a whole cupcake and you just have the crumb, and why, you know? So he says out loud to his friends, I'm going to make the most of the time you bought me. Thank you, Leonis. I'll never be able to repay this debt. He goes into the next chamber, and I am going to low-key fly through this part because all I really want to talk about are the abilities and the fact that he eventually wins. So he navigated his way past and reached the archway. He climbs this particular, like, room. He's looking around, and he can feel something, like, moving, like, density. And he just manages to, like, skip right around them, and it barely takes anything, you know? So, 14th chamber. Low ceiling. A cylinder of a room. And he's looking around. Again, there's no, like, beings here. And he's sort of going, what is happening? And as he is stepping forward down the stairs, Scoria looked past it and sensed further collection of similar sensations from random steps as they curved down and out of view. And he just jumps down the middle of this spiral staircase, which I think all of us have been on a spiral staircase and kind of thought, what if I just jumped down the middle of it? Wouldn't that be easier? I'm just putting this out there. Maybe it's pure projection, but I know that for myself, I have definitely been on that sort of staircase and looked down and been like, yeah, but I can see the floor I want right there. Let me just go. I don't want to do all this, you know, like, so, yeah, he lands and, I have no doubt it's a superhero landing. And then 15th chamber. There's sand on the floor, and a section of the wall moves and seems to unfold itself. It's a huge monster, and he's like, oh shit, because this is what he saw when he was leaving the chamber he was tossed into. And he just drops into a crouch and is like, all right, let's do this. And there's nothing quite as satisfying as a reader or a viewer as watching a main character go up against a bad that they faced earlier and just didn't have the chops to beat. It's like one of my favorite things. There's an extremely satisfying bit at the end of Cradle as well. And I know it's a trope and that it's a little tired and some people are sort of like wah, wah, about it because of that. I'm so sorry, but I don't care. This is the shit I live for. What is the fun? And I'm sure this says tons about me, but literally, what is the fun if you don't get to then go slap down the bitches who tried to play with you earlier? Like, come on. Of course. So, he uses his shroud here, and the fiend walks into it, and then stops and, like, shakes its head, and it seems very confused. It's just sort of like, hold on. And it's almost as if it warps his brain and makes it so that he just loses track of what it was that he was doing. It's unclear exactly because obviously this is a monster that can't speak, so there's nothing that it says that's really a clue, but it shook its head as if wanting to sneeze, looked uncertain. Knowing he had but moments before his igneous heart guttered and died, Scorio took 3 steps forward and leaped, causing his aura to wash completely over the rock fiend. And I felt a little bad for it. Like, I know the point is to kill it, that's why it's here, but also, like, that's a shitty life. And there's nothing that makes me sadder than somebody being, like, truly confused about their death. You know, not just like I can't believe that you betrayed me, but more like, wait, what's happening? Who are you? That kind of confused, and that just pulls my heartstrings. So, for a moment I was just like, oh, monster. So then he goes to the next room, and he's like feeling himself at this point. He says, look out, Jova, I'm coming for you. And he goes up to this, it's a sphere-shaped room, and it says directly above him, some 50 feet over his head, lay the exit, a black circle incised into the roof of the room. And he's looking at it, and he's like, wait a second. Am I supposed to fly? Climb? I don't get it. And he steps out of the little hexagon, and the room rolls. Or his own sense of internal balance changed. Down became the facet onto which he'd stepped, while his iron hexagon seemed to have slid up the side of the sphere a step. But more than that, the sphere came to life. A huge gout of pale green liquid rivered forth from a facet on the sphere's other side, undulating toward him at terrific speed as if water falling over the edge of a cliff. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and guess that in a trial like this, when you see a mysterious green liquid pouring down, that's just not something that you want your bare baby skin to come in contact with. And so, of course, it turns out that they are basically acid. And he, this is like one of the first moments that it really feels like he's sort of going, oh God, you know, like, you've got to began Scorio, then broke into a run. He brought his heightened form forth, wanting the protection his scales afforded him, and shielding his head, raced up the side of the sphere. Yada, yada, yada. He eventually gets through this as well. So I'm just going to do that. There's no need. I think we're good. 17th chamber. And it's funny to me because, like, it turns out that the estimate of how many rooms Jova was going to get through that, I think it was Naomi said, is dead accurate. Scorio swept coal into his heart and summoned his shroud, just as razor-sharp lines of invisible force slashed against it. And this is, he's still in the midst of the sphere challenge here, so I'm just going to jump ahead. Oh, man. So this is when there's, like, creatures that are swimming after him, and he's just like, God damn it. The wall was almost there, slicked in sweat, gasping for breath, his muscles burning. He strove to reach it, and then his heart died. How long it had lasted? 10 seconds? Maybe less. It felt like an hour. And I was like, well, I guess it feeling like that is probably for the best, I guess. So all of the creatures, which can seem to, like, tell that his heart is dead now, are coming at him. And he's like, oh, what am I going to do? And he stops himself from just jumping and drops flat to the floor. The cyclone of flattened fiends fell apart, and segments of their rug-like bodies fell away slowly. I swear, that's horrible. Any description of, like, their weird blood, any of these creatures, they all seem to have different blood, and it's always bad. So this is when he gets into something sort of like the grinder, but there are dudes on each of these, like, slopes, I guess. And it's sort of weird. It's not like they talk to him, but it is like they understand, and there's no sense to me of, like, I can't talk. It feels much more like, I don't find you worth talking to. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm gonna, there's a possibility they can speak. But it really felt like the sort of attitude that he has gotten from some people at the academy, So he's about to, like, jump into this shit. And all of a sudden, he sees Jova go past her. And as soon as he does, I'm like, oh, shit. Because now I'm knowing for sure. And it takes him a moment before he is understanding what he's seeing. But he actually gets to, like, watch her last moments and the way that this shook out for her, which is, like, a massive advantage, because now you can see what works, what these guys are more resistant to. And it's just like, look, I'm not saying that Scorio cheated. I'm not saying that, because if I'm not mistaken, it was like, there's nothing saying that nobody else got to this chamber. It's just that she was the one who got the furthest, right, so far? So she may have seen the shadow of somebody else? I don't know, though, because then that's not fair. So what I'm saying is, like, honestly, coming in second to last is kind of where it's at. You don't want to be first. You want to, like, watch other people do it. And if it's about how far you get and not about how fast you get there, I could definitely see people playing it like, maybe what if I hang back for a second, just take a gander and see if anybody else, But I don't know if that's if that is how it works with everybody seeing one of the people who was, like, before them, or if it's just when there's only two left and the second to last is the only one who gets to see any sort of, like, in which case, I stand by. That's a pretty huge advantage, to get to, like, watch the way it went down for somebody else so that you know what not to do. And she gets almost, I think, to the third square. And the whole, like, the whole fight is just Scorio just being like, wow, oh shit, Jesus Christ. Like, he is so impressed with how well she fights, how fast she is, how focused she is, and also the, like, amount of beating she can take and still get up. Like, all of it, the whole time, he's just like, wow, okay, okay. So, yeah, he's like, all right, I just gotta get past the third one. That's all I gotta do. And he does. A huge blade fucked into his back. His legs went numb. Scoria wanted to thank the fiend. I love that because he's just like, oh, God, dead. Thank God. I hurt. And so he has won the tournament. Now I'm thinking everybody has been watching this. Evidently not. And I'm a little bit confused about how that works. And I guess it's just that the way the tournament space is set up is just really different. Because everybody's definitely watching the tournament. So am I to understand that, like, the whole basilica gets filled up with people who just sit and watch a bunch of folks disappear and then reappear and nothing happened in between? Is that what... Because that feels boring as hell. Do they have, like, a highlights reel that they show at some point? It just felt like, wait, nobody knows that he won? Like, why isn't there anybody keeping an eye on things? But yeah, anyway, it's still the same here in terms of, like, when they wake up, they all wake up together, which is something that I had forgotten about. So the ones who had died long before him are coming out at the exact same moment he is, which is wild. And he doesn't get a chance to tell his friends that he won. It's like he's so overwhelmed by the reality of it that he can't say it out loud. And he can feel Lianshi looking at him, and it seems to me like she gets it. But she can't help but be like, no. Yeah? No. No, you didn't. Like, she just can't believe it. So, Praximar is up here about to give his speech. This dude, I really... Look, the thing about having this kind of hard-on to take somebody down is that if you fail to take them down, the least you can do is try and pretend it doesn't bother you that much. That, yeah, you got this, but I'll handle you eventually. And Praximar doesn't keep his cool at all. This dude absolutely loses his mind in front of everybody. And it's like, he gets it together so that some people may not have seen just how bad his, like, break was. But he's literally just like, there's been a mistake. This is impossible. Somebody tampered with the results. It's impossible. And it's just, sir, have a little dignity. Hold it in. Christ's sakes. Like, so, Leona's blinked, stared at Lianshi, then Scoria, then back to Lianshi. Wait. What? Light was starting to burn in the depths of Naomi's eyes, a gleam of pride and a joy so fierce that the sight of it caused Scoria's skin to prickle, a flush to rise to his face, a smile to curve his lips of its own accord. Never had he seen such intense happiness on her face. And they all, like, when there is just a moment, because fucking Praximar is like, no, you listen, over in the background, so they have, like, a second to kind of talk amongst themselves, which, again, sir, get a hold of yourself. But they're like, how did this happen? And he doesn't get a chance. My sincere apologies for the delay. You know that I am an inveterate showman. I'll stoop to the basest tricks to raise the tension. He's like an evil... Well, I was going to say evil, and I'm like, well, isn't that guy kind of evil? But the host of the Hunger Games, Caesar Flickerman, he's like him, but, like, much more despicable in his way, although one could argue there is some, like, less about this that's horrible than what Caesar Flickerman did. He just manages to be more likable, I suppose. So they announce who the third place victor is, Chen Shi, who it says, Chen Chenshi slipped off his beer with a victorious smile. His grin became especially pointed when he passed Kurrigan's beer, who stared at him with stony indifference. That's the way to do it. Stony indifference, I'm saying. That's what you want. And Chenshi achieved the stunning accomplishment of reaching the 13th chamber and earning 60 points. Recall that on his first attempt, he only reached the third. What an incredible improvement. So this guy bows, and Praximar is like, oh, you get to do another year. And he's like, of course I'm going to do another year. Why would I not do that? Crazy people would turn that down. And then the winner of the tournament promises a great future. Oh, that felt like somebody who has watched a lot of American Idol and a lot of poorly timed commercial breaks where you're just like, Jesus, just tell us who won. Because I think you guys all know what I'm talking about. They milked that shit for too long. So, will Jova Spike please come to the stage? She looks stunned. I feel so bad for her. I doubt anyone's ever felt bad for Jova Spike before, said Naomi. I do too, said Scorio, and realized that he meant it. And then, the moment our year has been building up to, will Scorio please approach the stage? And the silence seemed to implode, collapse under its own weight, then explode in incredulity and outrage. Leonis let out a reverberating roar as he leapt up to stand upon his beer, and Lianshi bowed low to him as he passed her by. He walked as if a foot off the ground, the moment surreal, his blood rushing through his ears, a second roar that made everything people said or shouted to him unintelligible. And Naomi says, with tears in her eyes, I was wrong about you. But deep down, I think I always knew. And I was like, that's the best apology I could hope for, frankly. That says it all. So then he breaks apart, climbs the steps, and Praximar has to paste a smile on his face and desperately attempt to create the same sort of energy as he would have if it were Jova Spike up there, and he is having trouble. So yeah, from here he studied in an exemplary manner, la 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 la, and en route he achieved the rank of Tomb Spark. Again, the crowd seemed to convulse in outrage. More than one dignitary behind him cried out in shock. Praximar nodded enthusiastically as if taking credit for this success, eyes gleaming. Oh man, he really sucks. Ugh. Now, Scorio is unaffiliated with any house, which means he can virtually choose his new home and on his own terms. Everything I said before about the importance of this moment stands true as ever. What an enviable position to be in. So, then he says, which house do you wish to choose? If you care to, you may address the audience as is customary of the Gauntlet's winner. And then, in a quieter voice, meant for him alone, Praximar whispered, choose your words with caution, my boy. Your success is not inviolable. And he steps back, and Scorio steps up, and he's like, this has been a crazy year, right? I've got some dope friends out there. Shout out to these guys. Definitely would not be here without them. They were the ones who helped break me through this bullshit system that you all are still blind to. Wow, what a racket. And right behind him, Praximar is starting to be like, what are you saying? And he's like, well, I'm just going to say thanks for everything, and I'm out. And Praximar's like, wait, what? And everybody around him is just, because like the whole thing is, I want desperately to come back, and he's just like, I'm good. Praximar says, so be it, Scorio. You cast aside what you cannot understand nor value. I believe it is within my rights to thus disqualify you from the gauntlet run and pass the victory to whom it was stolen from, the rightful winner. And I'm just like, I want to know what you're going to try and like spin this on. How it was stolen? How? exactly what do you mean? And he's fully anticipating that Jova Spike is going to be like, yeah, gimme. But he invites Jova up, and she looks at him, and she's got this face, and then she leans in and she's, yeah, I'm not coming back either. And basically just backs off and leaves. And when Scorio doesn't follow her, she turns around and is like, are you going to come? And then he does. He comes in his pants and then follows her out the door. So here comes the moment. I was so excited about this, everybody. I was so excited because, like, there are times when things going the way that you expected them to go are a bummer. You don't want it. You're like, look, you can't just do the thing. Come on. But this is not one of those times for me. This felt like, even though I figured it out, it wasn't predictable. That's not the same thing, you know? So I'm very, very excited about it. Scorio suddenly felt uneasy, didn't know how to stand, to act. Jova looked completely poised, not at ease, but alert, confident, still. So she just straight up first says, how'd you do it? And he says, hard work. I took a lot of weird risks. And, you know, I was able to do some shit that other people couldn't because they just don't need it. And he says, when she says, you went from Cinder to Tombspark almost overnight, that's unprecedented. It's not. Ever hear of a guy called Aeolus the Golden? He reached Flamevault in his first year. I just kept quiet about making Emberling a couple of weeks ago. Fine, I'm sure it's been done before, but still. You ascended from Emberling to Tombspark in only a couple of weeks. How? And he explains the desperation. And she says that her team fell apart rapidly. I went fast and hard. That might have been my undoing. I petitioned to enter with Juniper instead of Kurgan, but was denied, of course. Was denied? Why? What was that? Why not? Why can't she choose who she goes in with? So he's then like, all right, so about those journals, though. And she's like, yeah, I've read this shit over and over and over again. And he's like, wait, you found something? And she says, oh, yeah, it was not hard to find. Back then, I was also suspicious of you. But you came to me when I was Flamevault, and you were a Blood Baron, and you were being hunted, and you wouldn't tell me who by. But you had betrayed somebody or some organization. And they were real pissed and were after you. I'm kind of assuming this is his brother, but I don't like making that kind of assumption because it feels so obvious, so maybe not. But for now, that's what I'll go with. But there's a real sort of like asterisk next to that for me because part of me feels like that's too easy an answer, and that's like probably not, like this is a bit of a red herring. And then, let's see. My reputation was such you hoped my journals would remain inviolate, whereas any message you left to your future selves would be stolen and destroyed. And he's like, okay, so what's the message? And she reads out, Scorio, do not trust the houses, the imperators, and least of all, the herdsmen, who we have not heard of. Get it? Heard of? Everything is a lie. Our cause, our purpose, the reason we're bound to this hell, and our way out of it. The only way it breaks the cycle is to become the Infernarch. Unless you do, the cycle will repeat itself forever, damning us and countless innocents to this heinous masquerade. I know we can do this, not in this lifetime. My questioning has already drawn too much attention. No doubt we shall be placed on the red list for it. But you can do it. I tried to go it alone. I failed. Don't make my mistake. You can't do this by yourself. Damn the odds. Do whatever must be done. And I do really enjoy this because thematically speaking, what Scorio has been through, every challenge that has ended in like an advancement for him has been a group effort you know, even as like something as far back as getting out of the underground vault. I can't remember the name of it, but where he gets thrown for being a red lister. So, and Scorio's like, that's all I said. Like, there's no more. And she's like, you didn't want to say it because anything that was written down, you said would draw the attention of Imperators. And you just had to sort of talk around stuff. We spoke long into the night, and my previous incarnation came to trust you, or wished to, at any rate. You left next dawn, and I never saw you again. And he asks, like, how long are we supposed to have before, like, everything begins to fall apart? And Jova says 7 to 10 years based on the way the ruins are advancing. And he's like, yeah, that is impossible. What? And she just looks at him. And he's like, come on, what? It's impossible, right? And she says, I made a bet with myself after reading this that I would believe the warning and your previous self's words if you bested me in the gauntlet, because it seemed so fucking impossible. And then you did. So, you know, I intuited long ago, you don't want to fuck with the Housens. That's why I never signed up for any of them. The harder they pushed me, the more suspect they became. Intuition. That's it. But your warning and other things I wrote in my journal convinced me it might be otherwise. You were pretty adamant the last time we spoke about not trusting me because I was a red lister. That was before I read these journal entries. After our encounter in the hallway, I looked up this passage, and ever since, I've been wondering, doubting, questioning, and then, against all odds, you beat me. And he says, I only bested you by one segment. And she's like, whatever. You still won. And you also made fucking Tomb Spark. So, you know, whatever. And he says, my fucking heart, though, like, healing that's going to be years. And she says, we don't have years. And he looks up and says, we? And I'm like, Scorio, of course we. What do you mean? Of course we. This bitch is in. She invited you back to her room to look at her journals. Women only do that when they are A, psychostalkers who are very obsessed with you and been writing about you a lot in their journals and think that you're going to find it very charming and not at all terrifying, that they have written about your every move. Or people who are trying to ally with you. And that's the only two. So yeah, she's like, all right, well, we can reach an agreement, though. Like, we'll figure this out together. I didn't say what I said lightly, but if we can't trust anybody, and what you said was true, I mean, of course I'm just going to have to know what that's about. Dan says, that was a long sentence for journals off the top of your head. I just had a very vivid, like, image in my mind of the type of chick who would, like, write that, and then, you know, like, men and women can both become very obsessive over particular people in their lives, but a lot of times, due to the way we are raised with gender norms, they manifest extremely differently. And the journaling obsessively thing is certainly something I think is more encouraged when it comes to AFABs than it is to AMABs. So she's like, well, if this turns out to be true, I'll be in your debt forever. I don't like that. So, you know, I'm don't thank me, and we're just going to, like, move forward as a team. And then his friends bust in, and everybody is congratulating him and super happy for him. And it's a really nice little moment. Juniper says, we've not spoken much, but Leonci has told me a lot about you. Nothing private, said Leonci hurriedly. Nothing private, agreed Juniper, but Jova? I knew you had an independent streak as wide as the 10 hells, but what's going on? And Zala is like, yeah, girl, I know you're not talkative, but sorry, time to talk. Let's do this. And Leontia is like, Yeah, Scorio, I really thought that, like, you would at least accept some of the dope shit that they would offer you as a winner, and now you're leaving, which I think is what Praximar wanted anyway, so I'm confused. And Scorio reminds them all about the thing with the journals, and Jova admits that she has already told Zala and Juniper about this. And Scorio, we know he would definitely have told his friends as well, so I don't hold this against her at all. She actually, like, blushes a little bit at admitting that she told them, and I just think that's adorable. So he says, I'd unearthed some theories, I guess you could say, and they got me on the red list. I sent a warning to myself through Jova. Leona says the story we've been told a lie? How so? You mean a Terra? I don't know. Writing down more would have drawn the attention of people worse than the Imperator, apparently. But Jova and I are taking it seriously, and we're going to leave Bastion and try to learn more. And they were just like, and how are you going to do any of that? And he's like, yeah, we didn't get that far. We don't know. We're working on it, okay? Everybody just calm down. One thing at a time. And fucking Scorio, again, Leonis is like, when do you intend us to head out? We? The word almost choked in Scorio's throat. I don't expect you all to sacrifice. Oh, come off it, said Leonchi. You tell us we can't trust the houses in the academy and then expect us to stay behind and remain part of the system? I didn't necessarily assume you'd believe me. He's very slow, said Leonis patiently to Juniper and Zala. Oh, I love that so much. And he just gets all teary-eyed again, and Naomi's just like, of course we're coming. We have always talked about going to the Raskor Plains. That's where we're going, right? The doy. Yeah, Scorio, bruh. Did you think after all this that they would just, like, come on. Oh, God. So, yeah, all the others are in as well. Jova, Zala, Juniper. I think that's all three, right? So now we have a group of four. Or a group of 3 plus 4, so 7. And I want to point out, it's a group of 7, and there's only 2 men, and that's nice, because you know that if this were written by somebody else, it would be 2 women. And there would be the hot one, and then the one that's, like, less hot, but that the main character sees past the fact that she's, like, slightly less hot and then becomes very attracted to, despite the flashy one next to her, who is very overtly beautiful because he is able to see what she's really like inside, and then he can set aside that she's, like, 6 pounds overweight. It would be a whole thing. We all know what this is like. We've seen it plenty of times. So I just love the fact that it's, like, mostly women. Like, just totally outnumbered. It's great. So he says, our goal is nigh on impossible. I literally do not see how it can be done, but we have to try. If my warning is true, we can't be bound to a lie. And I love when Naomi says, there you go. I told you once, if you wanted real power, you were going to need a real desire to achieve it. Looks like you're finally on track. And he remembers that and is just like, God damn. Yeah, okay. Leon, she also points out, I think Praximar's going to be pretty mad, so probably we should just pack up and get the fuck out of here. What do you say? Just sorry this long. And he says that his friends, Helena and Fayan, in the, it says they contacted a group called Manticore. They were going to help get us out. I don't remember if we heard that name or if this is meant to be something that she mentioned to him. Like, I know that she said that she got the thing set up, but I don't remember the name Manticore. And it may just be, it didn't feel important at the time, and I just did not put it in my file. Juniper, excuse me, she recognizes the name and is like, I think they tried to form their own house. They had an Imperator who just, like, disappeared, and then their organization collapsed. They don't have a very good reputation, said Jova. It's a way out of here, said Scorio. We can evaluate our partnership once we're on the Raskor Plains, but I agree with Leonchi. We best get our belongings and quit the academy before Praximar escapes his ceremonial duties and comes for our blood. Okay, so Dan says it was. Oh my God. And then Dan says, God, that is how it works most of the time, isn't it? It's just always the way. So they get their stuff together. I love Zala just being like, this is really exciting. Scorio walks out with his friends and says, thank you for deciding to trust me. And I had a moment here of like, wait a second. Jova says you have to earn it from here on out. This is just a first step. I mean to do so. For a moment they stood thus, gazes locked, and then she gave him a grudging smile. Hurry up, Scorio. You won't make Inferno by lingering at my door. To which he could only laugh, and heart full, he turned and left with his friends, hurrying down the hallways of the academy. And that's the end of the book. And guys, I do not know if I even want a romantic thing. And if I did, I don't know if I would prefer it to be with Lianchi or Jova, but Jova is giving me queer. So I'm not even sure that she would be interested. Lianchi, honestly, all the girls kind of give me queer, to be real. Like, maybe none of them give a shit. It's certainly possible that Lianchi is bi. Naomi, same. Like, yeah, well, maybe we just don't do that part. That's fine. I'm so used to having to sort of keep an eye out for it, but maybe we just don't. And honestly, I kind of like that sometimes. Unless it's really, really well written, which it can be. All right. I'm wrapping this up. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you, Dan, for commissioning this. Next book will be coming. Let me take a look at the schedule real quick. August 13th, The Raskor Plains, chapters 1 through 3. So it's going to be over a month, kids. So you'll just have to bear it. I'm going to have to bear it. But I'm looking forward to it. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.